what happened was, according to, as I saw it from this particular speaker, that we were looking for a short-term gain based upon the idea that its history really doesn't matter, but it does matter, and it does bring it to the table. So my book says, let's do some observation about things in the past, things that are of a larger focus than just thinking all we have here is a bunch of raw material of which to move into the future. Let's go into the past and look at these. So it's not just to look at history, but also to look at these communities and what they can teach us.
This episode of Grounded in Maine is sponsored by ESG Review. ESG Review magazine is published quarterly in February, May, August, and November, and is available for free in print and digital formats. ESG Review is devoted to environmental, social, and governance strategies, technologies, and investments. ESGreview.net is updated every Wednesday with 8 new stories and is home to feature articles, news items, and more. Visit esgreview.net to stay informed and help us spark the collaboration and awareness needed to develop sustainable economies and communities around the world.
There's a place where there's no trouble, no more pain, no more struggle.
Grounded in Maine podcast is an open conversation about how we show up for the world. I started this podcast out of a desire to learn new ways to be sustainable because the word sustainability is big. It can be overwhelming, and I just wanted to learn, different ways to try to be part of the solution and not feel like it's too late. So I'm talking to people who are doing different things and learning so much. I hope you are too. Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Fagan, and my guest today is David Auge, who is an author. His book is called Man's Search for Sustainability. But David, thank you so much for being here today.
Great. Well, it's nice to be invited, Amy.
I love this. It's a fun conversation because you've been in this field for a long time.
Yes, quite a few years.
Yeah. And is this a new book for you?
It is. It's an effort to put on paper a method by which I want to communicate some important things about sustainability to the next generation.
Oh, why would you want to do that?
Well, kind of the purpose is the fact that I think we're losing a lot of the grasping of what sustainability is. Sustainability it's a normative term, and in many times people see it as a destination, not as a journey. Normative describes things. It's like beautiful is a normative term. Something can be more or less beautiful. Well, the same thing with sustainability. It can be more or less sustainable. And by writing a book, Man's Search for Sustainability, I hope to prompt the discussion, the development of thought around seeing this thing as a journey, seeing this concept as a journey and not as a destination, not as the next project we've just completed and let's go have lunch. Let's take a step forward in the concept of sustainability, understanding it in that fashion as opposed to something else.
Oh, wow. And so okay, so tell us about the book. Like you were saying that there's a connection to another author as well, but so you want to change sort of the path of, how do I want to word that? The path of how we are I'm going to stop talking for a sec. You tell me.
Okay, Amy. Well, the concept and the title of the book parallels something by a gentleman called Victor Frankl. Victor Frankl wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And his background, he wrote this book in 1945, about 3 months after having been released from a Nazi concentration camp. He was a Jew, and he had been in a concentration camp for about 3 years during World War II. His background was as an Austrian neurologist and psychologist, and he founded what was called logotherapy. It's it's a concept that what surrounds us and what motivates us as individuals is a search for meaning, our purpose for being here. Now that contrasts to two other psychologists who were also in Vienna. There's Freud and there's Adler, and both of those said no, like Freud, our desire, our concept for existence as humans is sexual in desire. It's a desire for pleasure and for meeting our needs of pleasure and going from there. Adler, his concept was no, it's the search for exercising power over others, of dominating one group as opposed to another. And Frankl, he came to the table and says, no, it has to do with a deep inner yearning for purpose, for meaning.
Mm.
And the reason why Frankl brought this to the table is because as he spent 3 years in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, he spent a lot of the times in the infirmary. He was an identified doctor, so they would take those individuals and place them into the infirmary to help the prisoners of those concentration camps either recover or ease their way to an eventual death if it didn't happen that
Mm.
the more horrific idea of going to the ovens were in place. But what he found is that those individuals that were in the infirmary, some of them had this innate desire, not for sex, not for power, but for purpose. And
Mhm.
that's where that was the fruit of his book. There was this desire to find out something that they had to produce. They were a doctor and they had to bring their latest idea to the table so that it could be used by the medical field, or a book that they needed to write, or perhaps there was someone, a wife or a child that was in another concentration camp and they just had to live through this whole horrific experience to see them.
Mhm.
Or third, and this is the one he capitalizes on, or third, they saw that there was a meaning bigger than themselves in the whole ordeal that they were going through. And that's where he spends a lot of time in this book, Man's Search for Meaning, in his focus. He says there's something bigger out there. You see, both his father died in a concentration camp or in the ghetto. His brother and his mother died in Auschwitz. His wife in Bergen-Belsen. His sister was able to escape. So after the entire event took place, after the entire horrific experience, he came out and he wrote this book.
Wow.
And it was this book, which I read, which I found, this is it. This is the tie to sustainability that I think if people could bring to themselves, they may be able to step forward. Because these individuals in those infirmaries were asking the question, should I sustain my existence for one more day in a situation where everything around me wants me dead?
Mhm.
And even if I don't make it, and I leave this infirmary and go back to the barracks, there most likely is going to be something placed in my path in the next year, 2 years, however many years, that is going to have me die. So that's where he kind of brought it to the table. And I thought, wow, what a fascinating way to bring the concept of sustainability, because most people say, well, we need to have clean air, clean water. We need to have an environment around us for the sustaining of another day, for our next generation, for the next 100 years. It's a concentration camp concept in many ways. We're looking at a restriction of the resources, just like in that case, it was your life, that we have to look at in in that fashion. And so anyway, I thought, wow, there's a good parallel. Let's see what we can do here with this concept placed on the table and then brought forward for people to consider.
That's fascinating. And I think I totally get that. Like, it's not necessary, like you were saying, sustainability is not the end goal. It's like the journey, right?
Mhm.
Like you need to take on that purpose of sustainability, not necessarily shoot for that goal. We just need to be um tell me if I'm getting this wrong. Like I feel like um it I feel like I'm getting it, but I might be misunderstanding. But like, if we're all taking on some ownership of this and it's about the journey, not necessarily the end game or
That's right. Right. One of the things that Frankl brings forth in his book, and I included in mine, was the fact that if you sat down with a chess player, and it was the most fantastic chess player on the planet, and you looked at the chessboard and the pieces had been moved, you were halfway through the game or whatever, and you said, what is the best move that I can make? Well, the only perspective he would have is the fact that Well, there are multiple best moves. It depends upon the array of pieces that are moving one way or another. It's not that simple as this is the pawns or the rook or the queen. There's something that each one of them brings to the table, brings to the board. And as a master chess player, what they have to do is look at the entire situation upon which the next step is. I'm making sustainable decisions right now at my age. I'm still employed, but I'm getting close to retirement. There's decisions I'm making about the sustaining of my life, my family, uh, the town of which I live in. The same as yourself. You've recently moved. Your relocation has resulted in your making decisions about how to sustain what you see as valuable into the next step.
Mm,
That's what the man's search for sustainability, because it's not a single that's it. It's a larger picture of a number of different things.
sure. Like a series of steps. Like,
Right.
and so you're a chess player too?
I am not the best, but I enjoy it.
Okay. What do you not do? You used to ski, you're chess player. Oh my gosh. Like all these are super, skilled things. You're like, yeah, of course I do that. Sure.
You're 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 making me blush if I can even do that with this terrible lighting that I'm standing in. But yeah, thanks, Amy.
Oh gosh. That's really fascinating. I mean, I know nothing about chess. I mean, I watched the Queen's Gambit, but that's it. But I that makes sense too. I mean, it's not like one particular step. There's a series. So you have to have like a not necessarily an end game, but like you have to have an idea of like what are you going to do after that one? And then if that person plays blah blah blah, which I don't know anything about, but like you have to be thinking like three steps ahead, sort
Hmm.
of.
Anticipating what their move might be and their skill and
Yes.
their particular bent in how they play. The same thing here with sustainability, making decisions upon which where you're at that particular time.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's totally true. It's a different, um, like you were saying, we've kind of lost that idea because we're like, ooh, sustainability is way up here. We have to get there. But it's also like all these little things that are, all these little, not necessarily little, but there are so many things that we can be doing and not necessarily, I mean, yeah, my words.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know what I
and
mean.
yes, I do. And what I'm trying to do, I guess, Amy, in this book is say let's observe things. Let's observe them before we go to application, because the steps of learning and applying things first start with observation,
Mm,
then interpretation, where you find the general rule based upon what you've observed, and then you apply it. Then you take the step, the appropriate one in the situation that you're in. Well, if you don't spend that time in observation, you just scurry all the way to a quick interpretation and then you start to apply things, you may have it wrong. You may not have gathered enough information for you to adequately understand the situation you're in. You had told me earlier about bringing chickens into Virginia and the fact that they had to receive shots before they arrived there. Well, that overarching requirement to bring chickens shots before they enter the city, the state
okay.
of Virginia, is something that the state of Virginia has put into place, almost like a chess game. And you have to make a decision. Do I transport the chickens in? Do I not transport them in? What's the health situation? What's the risk that's here?
Did I
Is
play
it more
chess,
sustainable?
David? Did I play
Ah,
chess?
you
Not
were
knowing,
actually, yeah, not knowing it. But
of
you were
course,
making
not
it.
knowing Amy.
But I
That's
mean, once
fun,
again, that's the observation before you then had to make a decision what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. And
right?
then seeing Virginia made the state of Virginia made these decisions about shots. Well, you have to interpret, well, there's a rationale behind it. And they're not just willy-nilly saying, it's Amy. Okay, tell her she needs shots for the
Right,
chickens that are going to come to the state.
right. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's really funny. That's really funny. I mean, I literally just last week I got a phone call from the state of Maine and they were like, they said something about paying something out of some grant. I hope I'm not going to get them in trouble, but like they they shredded my check.
Oh,
to
great.
pay for something because they were like, it's like 33 cents per chicken, but you paid 26. I don't know. Like it didn't make any sense to me. And they were trying to figure it out. And they're like, you know what? It's going to be like $2 and something. We're just going to shred your check. And like you overpaid by a lot. But that that has nothing to do with this conversation. It just came up. It was in my brain. But yeah, this you were saying, they saw me coming and they were like, we're gonna tell Amy that she needs to get all this stuff done.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Or you say, well, maybe I can observe that they're doing this with everybody, and there might be some rationale. They had to interpret that chickens coming into the state of Virginia were a concern, and therefore that's why they've applied this rule, and you had to follow suit.
right. Hmm. That I love the story. I mean, I need to get that book. I need to get my hands on that book. Because that sounds, I love the way that you tell it because it's not, did you do an audiobook?
Well, there actually is an audiobook. Yeah, it's
Oh,
not my voice; it's someone else's voice reading the book. But
that's
yeah,
very cool. Yeah. So tell me more about the book.
okay. Well, the rationale behind the book was the fact that I could place on the table two things to observe that hopefully wouldn't insult anybody. Many times when you bring the concept of sustainability to the table, people go, a political discussion. Ah, we're going to get into a political arm wrestling contest over this. So that's what I didn't want to do. I wanted to put on the table two extremes. One that everybody says, no, that's it. That's the best sustainable community out there. They're honeybees. They've got it down. If we could all just be like honeybees, the world would be a better place. And then you go to the other extreme, where it's just desert locusts. I mean, they're in the Bible as the eighth plague and the destruction of Israel and kicking them out of or taking them out of Egypt.
Right.
Oh, there's biblical proportions that are associated with this thing. This is a rotten creature. It destroys communities, state, nations, even. This is something that's on the other end of the spectrum. So I put both of those on the table. One which most people would say is very sustainable and something we want to be like, honeybees. And the
Right.
other one, desert locusts. Well, my goodness, they just eat and reproduce and just consume everything until nothing's left and they all die. We don't want to be that way. Well, let's look at strengths and weaknesses of both of them. If they're distant enough from us, we can observe and learn from both of them. There's strengths and weaknesses in both community.
Hmm.
And from there, maybe we can search for sustainability without becoming so politically charged about the concept at all.
Right.
And that's the reason for the book. So I wouldn't start off with someone looking and going, oh, I'm not reading that one. No, let's start at least observing these two and let's walk forward in it.
Right. It's not like good, bad. It's like, everything has a purpose and
Yeah.
a strength and yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So what I did, and this kind of goes to the story I think I told you about Amy at the beginning of the book, is I was at the West Point Society of Greater Houston. I'm a West Pointer, and West Pointers have different groups all around the country. And they're usually young officers, sometimes older officers, and we meet for lunch and we have conversations. And many times there's individuals still in the military, sometimes it's retired, sometimes it's parents who are there because their children have been nominated to go to the academies. Anyway, I was in Greater Houston in 2001, November of 2001. It was a couple months after 9/11. And we had an expert at that luncheon who was talking about what we were probably going to have to confront in the Middle East with this most recent attack and in New York City and the Pentagon and what have you, and wanted to give us some things to think about. And he said you can kind of justify or explain the frustration we were going to have as a country by understanding two words. And he said those two words are it's history. I guess it's a contraction of one word, so it could be it is history, but it's history. So it's history. He says if you're a Western mindset, if you're American, it's history in our vocabulary is a way of saying it's irrelevant.
mhm.
It's history. Don't worry about it. It's water under the bridge. We just don't need to concern ourselves because it's history. He says, in the Middle East, you're going to find out that the word its history means it is relevant. What has happened in the past has given us a point from which to make decisions now and go into the future. And he said, because of our lack of appreciation for observing the past, we as a Western society are going to be confronting an entirely different approach to the history from this point to into the future.
Mm.
And I had friends that found themselves over there for a long time in Afghanistan and Iraq, who pretty much said we fought a 1 year war 20 times. We had a concept of what we were going to do in the next 12 months. And then after 12 months, it was like, this war's still going on. And we did the same thing again for 1 year. Oh, it's still going on. And what happened was, according to, and as I saw it from this particular speaker, that we were looking for a short-term gain based upon the idea that its history really doesn't matter. But it does matter, and it does bring it to the table. So my book says, let's do some observation about things in the past, things that are of a larger focus than just thinking all we have here is a bunch of raw material of which to move into the future. Let's go into the past and look at these. So it's not just to look at history, but also to look at these communities and what they can teach us.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to learn from what has happened in the past, for sure.
Right.
I mean, there are so many things that we do now that we didn't do, you know, decades ago, but there's a reason why, like because
Mhm.
we've learned from things, but to say that it doesn't matter just seems like irresponsible, sort of.
Or short-sighted in a lot of ways. Its history has become something of a, well, just ignored. We've had so many technological advances. We've had so many changes in the way we do things. I mean, you and I are talking, states away from right now in front of a computer screen. 100 years ago, this was not even conceived of, but we can do this. Now
Mhm.
that gives us some technological advances, but it doesn't give us, or it might strip away from us the fact that we're still two people talking. We're still two individuals trying to communicate an idea.
Right.
That's something 100 years ago might have happened a little more successfully, just because I don't know, they had a chance to see each other face to face. They didn't have a wall of just the two-dimensional screen that we're currently looking through.
Right. Totally. Oh, jeez. Okay, so we were talking about bees and locusts and learning from their strengths and stuff like that. How would we like correlate that to us?
Well, okay, well, in the book, what I do is I look at stress, uh, managing work, making decisions, communicating, maintaining balance. What I do is I say there's strengths and weaknesses in each one. Let's look at the concept of stress. Okay, the a beehive is extremely ordered. They handle the stress of the situation through a very structured organization. There's a queen, there's a bunch of workers, a very small percentage of drones. They have about 4 to 7 different jobs. They hold those jobs and complete them, whether it's cleaning up the hive, whether it's nursing the young, whether it's working their way into foraging or the processing of honey or pollination. They do it in a very structured fashion. The queen lives for between 2 to 5 years. The workers live for about 6 weeks. That structure gives them strength. And, and that order allows them to handle stress because as stress happens, they communicate with one another. The queen will pretty much give a direction. The worker bees will communicate that there's an attack at the door of the Langstroth hive, the box that most people see that the bees are maintained in.
Mhm.
They'll understand the fear pheromones of who's attacking, and they'll attack at certain spots. That structure gives them the ability to handle stressful situations. For example, if it gets real hot, they'll actually get their wings and will get water and they'll actually act as a cooling source for the inside of the hive in very hot temperatures. If it's cold, like right now, they'll actually vibrate the back portion of their muscles, which will heat up the inside of the hive, maintaining the temperature about 93 degrees at all times.
Dang.
So now let's go over to locusts. Okay, locust stress is a good thing. When a locust was actually, and I talk about this in the book, a locust was was a grasshopper. A locust becomes a locust because of a phase change. Boris Yurov, who's a Russian entomologist, brought this to the table, to the surface for many people to understand about 1920. He found out that in stressful situations, a grasshopper, and in this case, he was in the steeps, the mountains of Russia, will, with time, usually through a few generations, become a locust. Instead of being at night and green, having a small brain and certain muscles, it will change to a very yellow insect. The color will change. It'll stop working at night. It'll go and start to operate during the daytime. Its brain will increase by a factor of about 30%. It'll become such an insect that it will group together and work together in going forward to consume everything that's in sight. Stress is a benefit to it because the stress actually makes it stronger. It makes the community stronger. It makes it reach out and be almost something that, as a single nation, we can't contend with. In fact, the United Nations, one of the first successful organizations they put on the map, was an effort to confront locusts as an international group, because locusts, they could care
Oh,
less if they're going to a national boundary, they'll go right over it. But they had to, with the United Nations, be able to fight it across those boundaries to continue to contend with it and finally suppress it. But
wow.
stress is good for them. It gives them growth. Stress for bees is difficult. They have the order, they'll contend with it. In some cases, they'll lose. Uh, the the stress that hits a locust, they'll probably not lose. Stress will actually be to their benefit. So anyway, that's what I do in the book.
Wow.
Meaning I take communication, I take stress, I take balance, I take work allocation and say, let's see how they do it. Let's see the strengths of their efforts and let's see the weaknesses of their efforts as
Mm.
well.
I keep thinking when, as you were talking about the locusts, I'm just thinking about people that do really well under pressure, like that type
Mm,
of thing. Like they just really thrive with the, like deadlines and stuff like that.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and society seems to do that as well. When they're placed under stress, they seem to uh, bring to the surface the most creative of the population there to help, if it's a victory they're looking for in some type of conflict, the ability to win.
Mm.
Um, and so those things from a societal aspect aren't always so detrimental. I'm in North Carolina, in Western North Carolina. The flooding, the damage from Hurricane Helena was devastating. But at the same time, some of the reports out of there of communities working together, of individuals saying, I had no idea that my neighbor was willing to give me almost the shirt off their back in order to be able to contend with what we're now facing.
Right.
And
True
the love
story.
that they had, yeah. And it came not from the stress that they all broke down, but the stress made them band together and stronger.
100% true. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's so interesting because I think that you and I had this conversation about bees and locusts too. And I just think, bees have that order and they have I guess I'm just going to go with order, but,
Yeah,
uh,
caste structure. Yeah,
yeah, but they like also they're very fragile. Like they're
yeah,
very fragile and they require our help to contain them and to keep them safe.
right.
So as much as organized as they are, they still need, I'm just thinking like, locusts have survived like people trying to take them out.
Mm, yeah,
And that's the stress makes them stronger thing, but that's it's something that and of course, Hurricane Helene has taught a lot of people to work together and that's true, with those huge storms and the damages and stuff like that. People really band together, or like, when with an attack or something like that, people really band together and they work together. And that's a good thing. It just makes people realize that we're actually on the same team.
right. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, and helps to strengthen that team as well. I mean, many times it seems like the toughest coach seems to have the best football team.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Oh gosh, yeah. Uh, was there more that you wanted to touch on from the book on that?
Well, one let's go to making decisions. Okay.
Okay.
One of the things about making decisions, and it also has to do with communication, is that bees have the ability to debate. They have the ability within that community to actually um, bring information back about the best sources where they might find nectar or pollen to the hive. And in that travels and in that return to the hive, the bee that now knows a good place to go will communicate through a dance. And that dance will indicate the direction as well as the intensity with which he dances or she dances, because the bee is entirely a female-led organization. Her dance will actually communicate um, through its intensity the favorability of what they have found out there. If it's a lot of pollen, if it's a lot of nectar, if it's a good source, the
Right.
intensity with which they dance actually is communicated.
Mm.
They do this also when the hive is trying to relocate. There's a debate which is happening on the outside of the hive. Now, let me back up a little bit. Okay, for one hive, that is one collection of bees, to become two, for that one little community, if you want to call it a city, to become two little cities, they have to leave the hive, and they do so usually in the springtime with about 60% of the bees and the older queen, she leaves with them, and they hang around on a tree. And they'll do this between 24 to 72 hours. They will be a ball of bees that are staged for the next step of relocating to a new home. Okay, so now that they're in this ball of bees that people say, oh my goodness, I've got to do something with it, there's actually a debate taking place within that ball. A certain number of those foragers are going to act as scouts, and they're going to start to look for the best place to create their new home.
Right.
They'll do that by flying away, just like they were searching for nectar or pollen, and looking for a location that's usually a tree trunk that has a small opening, the opening going to the south, usually about 15 feet in the air. They would like it to be dry. They would like it to be have in there, perhaps some comb where a previous, you know, hive was located.
Yeah.
And then they'll come back to that ball of bees, and they will do that dance on the outside of that ball. Now, a number of other bees will be doing the same thing, and they'll come back. And in that debate, those bees making that dance will prompt others to say, you know what, I think we ought to check this one out too. And they'll go and look at it. They'll come back. They'll do the same dance. That same dance lasts between 24 to 72 hours. And the intensity with which that dance follows will gradually die away. It's a it's almost as if every single time they come back, they're just not as excited as they were the first time. It's called leakage of information, is the way most of the entomologists kind of describe it. Well, that leakage of information is going to make it so eventually there's only one dance happening on the outside of this ball of bees, and it will convince the rest, which is usually about 99% of them because they haven't even seen it, that, this must be the best choice. Then, as a mass, they will fly almost like a school bus, because that's the way they do so, from that location to the new home, which could be as far as 2 to 3 miles away. It's a fascinating ability to communicate, ability to debate, and ability to move a group based upon, not the parochial interest of the decision, but upon leakage of information and an eventual giving of this idea is not as good as this one, to finally make a decision of where to go. As humans, we can learn a lot about it because we're so bent into this. This is the only way to do that. We don't listen to the compromises out there that
Totally.
could
Oh my
come up with a
gosh. Yes.
better solution. Yeah.
Oh,
And that's what,
jeez. Yes.
yeah, we're going to die on our particular situation where let's compromise a little bit. Let's go a little bit this way and not die because of this issue opposed to somebody else. Okay,
Mm,
so that's how they communicate and they make decisions. Now let's go over to the locusts.
okay.
Locusts have um, a reputation for marching forward almost like an army. They go forward as an army many times because they have tremendously large eyes. The eyes have almost 180-degree. They can see from almost down all the way up and then to the left or the right. They have this incredible seeing capacity. Yet, we can't in any way, just like you're trying to do, Amy, right now, is how far can I see to the left or the right? Well, these things can see tremendously. Well, those eyes are actually a big part of the brain that's expanded. It gives them a greater awareness of what's happening around them, so that as they do move forward, they move forward in awareness of what everybody else is doing around them.
Mm.
In many ways, it parallels social media and the ability social media has upon driving us to know what the general consensus is of the steps forward that we need to take. They many times do that movement because their numbers give them strength over predators. You know, that very sheer, um, just the millions, billions, and perhaps even trillions. And then we do have some comments in the book about trillions of locusts in one place at one time.
Oh my
Make
God.
it so that, yeah, things that are going to try and attack them, back off and say, you know what, let's just leave this group to themselves for a while. And that particular ability to move as a group, because they can observe what everything is happening around them, gives them a strength as a community that is overwhelmingly strong and overwhelmingly impactful upon the efforts of where they want to go.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yeah, so and you can see the parallel to our own abilities to use social media, to use other communications opportunities to move us as humans in that way. So anyway, those are strengths that they both have. Of course, they both have weaknesses too. You know, the
Mhm.
fragility we talked about with bees, the fact that sometimes you wonder just what is driving these locusts. Is it really just reproduction and food? You know, that's kind of a low, uh,
Isn't it though?
yeah, common denominator for them to be doing whatever they're going to be doing. But yeah, it is something.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Now, how did you choose bees and locusts? Like, was that something that you've been researching for a long time and you were like this?
Well, let's see.
uh,
Let's start with bees. About 5 years ago, uh, we had we positioned bees on the company I work for onto the site. I work at a site with lots of acres, so lots of acreage. There, we have a wildlife habitat area, and as a part of that, we have, you know, trails. We have a lot of natural fauna and flora that we can develop. We also have about 5 beehives, and there was a individual that worked there who was a bee expert. He was a beekeeper who positioned these and then started to train other employees about how to use them. So through about 2 years of that, I decided I'm going to do this at home. I think I've learned enough that I can do this by myself. And so I purchased a nuke. That's a grouping of honeybees that are, 5 frames long, and you can anyway. They're already somewhat established. Brought that home, and I started to develop and learn about bees myself. Now,
mm,
why did I get really interested in it, Amy? Amy, the like any situation, we're pretty foolish and stupid when we first get into it.
why did
And
I do it? I don't really know. I thought it would be cool.
yeah, well, I don't like getting stung, and I got stung quite a few times. And one particular time I was out there and I was moving the bees around, and this was a pretty I had 2 hives. This was a pretty aggressive hive, and I was moving certain things around. And all of a sudden I started getting stung on my ankles. And I just had tennis shoes on, some jeans, and the normal covering that you would have if you're a beekeeper. And they were stinging me on my shoulders. I got stung on the face. Anyways, I was in a mess, and I went inside. I couldn't walk for about the next 2 or 3 days. And I thought, I'm either going to end this misery with a baseball bat and go out there and just, crush the box, let them go figure out wherever they're going to live. It's not going to be in my backyard. Or I'm going to really start to study this insect and really figure out what I can. And that started me down the road of reading. And
Mm,
then I read a book where someone just kind of they were comparing bees and locusts, and they just poo-pooed locusts. And I thought, I don't know that much about locusts.
mm,
Are they true in their contrast to this? And then when I started to read about locusts, I was just really overwhelmed because there's both good and bad there as well.
sure.
And so that prompted me. Actually, the being strung on my ankles and my ankles swelling up like you wouldn't believe was almost the end of this whole effort.
Um, wow. I mean, as you're talking about the locust, I keep thinking like it's one of those things that you don't really think about, but when you do think about it, you're like, that's really beautiful how they to understand sort of their like purpose, and it's just that they are the sheer numbers, like you were saying.
Mhm.
And they don't seem like they're good, but they have strengths that we just don't understand because we're
Right.
so, we're so like black or white in our world.
Mhm.
Hmm.
We don't try and get into the community that they have. If you're a locust, you don't like humans because we're coming at them to kill them and
Right,
destroy them.
right.
But if you're a locust, there are certain strengths that they have that we could learn from.
Yeah, true. I mean, there are things like, I mean, I'm gonna use ticks as an example because I just don't see any purpose for ticks. I think they're just evil. But I mean, I'm sure a lot of people probably think of locusts like that as well. Like just, what is their purpose? They're just here to, like you said, just consume everything and descend on our area. Um, and so that whole like good bad, like they're just bad. There's no reason for them to be here. But we can really learn from them if we think about that.
And that's one of the things that I bring up in the book about something called Rocky Mountain locusts. In the United States, we do not have a locust species. We don't have a grasshopper that phases into a locust like the rest of the continents of the world. But
Mm,
we did. We had an insect, and it was a grasshopper that could turn into a locust, and did so up until about the 1890s. But in the 1870s, there was a gentleman named um, Childs. He was called Alfred Childs, who was a medical doctor in Nebraska, and he observed a locust swarm flying over the state of Nebraska and descending upon a few states nearby. He had the instrumentation as a meteorologist to find out that that locust swarm was approximately 110 miles wide and a mile thick. And between June 15th and June 25th of 1875, it flew over his head at about 10 to 15 miles an hour for a
oh my
10-day
gosh.
period. Yeah, and he was reporting this to the meteorologist resources that we had in Washington, D.C., and was writing everything up, saying this is just incredible. He had an estimate, and he thought it was a lowball estimate of almost 3 trillion locusts flying at that
Ooh,
time.
talk about overwhelming. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
And
and
moving so fast. And
mhm.
what did you say? 100 and how many miles?
110 miles wide, 1 mile thick, and traveling for approximately 10 days.
That's insane.
Yeah. And of course, the states at that time had to harness their state resources because
Mhm.
they were all being consumed. The farms were being wiped out. They had to find some ways to fight against this. And a lot of it had to deal with the fact that prior to our using this as a farming territory. The Indians used it for the grazing of buffalo as well as the consumption of these locusts. Locusts have about 50 to 60% protein. They're very much like a shrimp. And when they die, and they die after 5 to 6 months and can be just easily swept up and dried and eaten, they would provide a higher protein content in the diet of the Indians than the buffalo would. And they would be significantly easier to gather. Anyway,
Well, sure, with those
yeah,
numbers. 5, 6 months?
yeah.
That's a lot of bugs.
Yeah, yeah. And anyway, as you think about the bad part of it, this is actually the good part of it. They were a part of a staple diet that they could use, and also some of the things that even in Africa with the desert locusts, there's a bad part about it. I mean, they do destroy standing farms, but they were found to provide a protein enriched diet to those people that could wisely collect them and eat them
Hmm.
after the insect died. Now, do we want to eat them? No, I don't think so. But you could see that people looking at the opportunities out there said, well, there's no wheat left. There's no barley left. There's
Right.
nothing in the
I
fields
mean,
left.
it's happening more and more. I know that there have been like insect tasting evenings and stuff. I know in Maine there was one, but there's a lot more talk of that with um, the protein issues.
Yeah.
Hmm. Wow.
So anyway, I kind of bring that out in the book too, because I'm trying to get people to look at these two extremes and not just say, well, I got that. Let's go about it. Let's observe and then we can interpret and apply.
Mhm.
Because as this journey of sustainability moves forward, we need to look a little deeper than we routinely do. We need to delve into what's been presented to us on this planet and is sustainable or is being propped up as being sustainable so that
Mhm.
we can make the right decisions.
True. Yeah. I mean, it's just it's an interesting, I always say angle, but that's the only word that I can think of, but like it's just a really different way of looking at it. And I think it's really important. So I appreciate you bringing that up,
Yeah.
and writing a book, of course, because it's just like, I mean, like we were talking about, like we're just so black and white. You're either good or you're bad, and we're always at each other to figure that out. But there's also, there's so much that we can learn from each other and oh, I can't think of the word that I wanted to use. Compromise.
Mm.
Compromise.
Yeah.
Um, and or just negotiate, there's so much that we can learn a lot from that.
Right. Right.
So
And
thank you
hopefully
for
get a
that.
bigger picture. I mean, I know we've been talking for some time now, Amy, but there's a quote that is frequently used by Viktor Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning, and it's from Nietzsche. Some people think that Nietzsche is not the best person to quote from, but he has some very fascinating insights. And one of the things that he says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." It, Viktor Frankl says, let's look at logotherapy. Let's look for the search of meaning, a why to live for. Our why of sustainability is the decision by which we make decisions of what we're going to do. What car are we going to drive? What kind of house are we going to live in? What kind of relationships are we going to foster? What kind of food are we going to eat? What kind of array of country interaction are we going to have? The why do we do that? Having been thought through and having been known within our very being will help us handle any how. Uh,
Hmm.
you, ma- you asked about the changes in the environment that are around us, whether it be rivers or whether it be air quality or something like that, or global warming. Those particular things that ask the question of how are we going to do this have to kind of circle back to the why do anything at all.
Hmm. Why does it matter to you?
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Oh gosh, it's actually really deep, and I appreciate that, you bringing that up. My goodness. Um, so okay, so I mean, so you were saying, around climate change and stuff, like why do anything at all? Like why would we do it? Um, and so this book is, you said this is sort of, it's geared toward the younger generations ish, that it's a point that needs to be made because some of us are kind of stuck in our ways and not interested in um, doing anything, but people need to be educated on that, and we need to find our like our source, our power, our meaning.
Mhm.
Um, Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
It's really deep, and I love that. It's more than just like recycle, man. It's like why do you feel like you need to do that? What's the purpose of that, and what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Why are we doing it? And that hopefully will be prompting the question. Let's do some observation before we jump through interpretation to application. It seems to be those three steps need to be followed, and I'm trying to get back to observation. Let's slow
Hmm.
down and look, and then we can determine and find the general rule, the why, and then apply.
Ooh, I love that. So important. What a great topic. What a great topic for a book, man. I'm so glad that you did that.
Thanks,
Uh,
Amy.
and so Just in the interest of time, my goodness. It's fascinating. I mean, who would have thought bees and locusts, when we're talking about sustainability, but this is so fascinating just to think about. I mean, when you're saying just like slow down, let's think about this and using that as an example. Um, all right. So, David, when I say the word sustainability to you, I mean, I know you just wrote a book about it, but like, what does that mean to you?
It's a normative term. It's a term that used as a describer of something upon which we want to take action. It's normative, like the word beauty.
Right.
Something can become more or less sustainable. So, what I understand it to mean is a journey upon which we want to make what we're doing more sustainable, not less.
Got it. Okay. And I didn't even notice if you had given, are you on social media? I know you're on
I'm on,
LinkedIn.
yeah, Instagram. But if you want to see my book, I got a website. It's davidaugebooks.com. And I'm hoping this won't be my only one. You and I have talked about Breckenridge, Colorado, and I've got relatives that are, you know, were in that town many, many decades ago now. But there's something about that I think we could learn under the umbrella of sustainability as well. A small mining town where most people went into that town for the sole purpose of getting gold and then getting back out. I mean, you're at 9,700 feet above sea level. You know, who wants to live there all their life? They usually want to get in and get back out. But that town stayed, and that town had a certain dynamic that I think we could learn from. Once again, most of us weren't alive. Well, I don't think anybody was alive in 1890 that's still alive now. But that town can shed light on what they did to remain sustainable and to, as a result, still be around today. Of course, they're skiing today, they're not mining, but it's still there.
Totally. Yeah. Um, okay. So, I mean, I'll have the link to the book, to your website, I should say. And I definitely recommend you guys look into this some more. I will be doing that as well. Um, but so you're on Instagram. What is your Instagram handle, David?
It's Auge 305, AUGE 305.
That's very mysterious.
Yeah. I know I probably should say something about the book, but that's what it is right now.
That's okay. Cool. But I will have links to everything in the show notes, you guys. And I hope that you've learned something here and it's given you something to think about. It just is it's a different way to think about a lot of things. And so, David, I really, really appreciate all the thought and all the work that you put into this. And this is fascinating. Um,
Well,
but
thanks, Amy.
thank you
Thank
for
you for
hanging
giving me the
out.
opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And if when you write another book, we'll do this again.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome.
I just want to take a second to thank my guest again for speaking with me and sharing such great information. I love having these conversations with folks. I also want to thank Buzzsprout for hosting the podcast, for Jane Bolduck and her music genius, for Becca Coffron and her award-winning artwork. And thank you for listening. I appreciate that so much. Please check out the show notes for any links and extra information. And if you would like to follow my guest and find out more about them, I'm sure they would love the follow. And if you don't mind leaving a rating or review wherever you're listening, and just help to get this podcast in front of new eyes, that would be amazing. I would really love that. And feel free to reach out to me on the socials and let me know what you're thinking. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please let me know that. I would love to have a conversation with you about sustainability. All right. Thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of the week.
there'll come a day. My mama told me when I find love to have and hold me, a heart that's strong and so sincere. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? Oh, tell me, how do I get there from here? 'Cause here and now I'm so far down that mercy's bound to find me. We'll find a way to soothe the sickness. We'll heal the hate with sweet forgiveness. Wages of war will disappear. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? I wonder, how do I get there from here? Yeah, 'cause here and now I'm so far down and mercy's bound to find me. When that state of grace has finally found me, well, there'll be music, ooh, and good friends around me, yeah, yeah. And I'll just smile through happy tears.